All right, everyone. This is the 33rd Degree by Lucifer Tim. It's 11 times worse than just the third degree. And those of you who've been there know what I'm talking about. Phones are open 833-311-1984. Live for the second time today. If you missed it, I was live earlier on Crater Earth USA. And if you want a link to that live stream, I will post it in the notes below this. So again, Infinite Plane Radio, get on the newsletter. Or Dark Matter Radio. Either one works. So hello to everyone in chat. Again, phones are opening up here momentarily. 833-311-1984. I realize we just had New Year's Day, but it's still 1984. Always will be. Just want to set your expectations. This year's not going to be any different. Meteor rattles Pittsburgh. I was saying on New Year's there's going to be something from the sky, some kind of controlled re-entry of space junk, according to one report, but no, they just went with a meteor. It doesn't really matter. It really doesn't. Misinformation from the United States is the next virus, and it's spreading fast. It's deadly, malicious, and there's no vaccine. The infodemic is here, but it's not unstoppable. That's from macleans.canada.ca. Yeah, look, we said this before the pandemic. They're using the lexicon of epidemiology to describe information they don't like. Your memes are AIDS. Your memes are cancer. They're using this language because they want to designate new thought crimes. Joined by the missing P. Trippa, Bull Run. Thirst for Truth, Kevin 44, Psy-Obstacles, Iniquitous Man, and Kevin 44. Yes, you are super spreaders of the most dangerous virus of all time, the infodemic virus, misinformation. Now, whatever they deem disinformation or misinformation can vary from day to day, so you have to make sure that you watch the news every day to make sure you're on the right side of history. It's like in 1984. They can change it on the drop of a dime. Biden and Trump to address split screen nation on January 6th anniversary. So January 6th, the anniversary date of the 33-year-old son of a Democrat judge, Jake and Jelly, voice actor, turned insurrectionist, which doesn't make sense that a guy with a spear is going to walk in and try to make some kind of political change, but you have to understand iconography. And it turns out that before they got into the Klan hoods, the Ku Klux Klan would actually dress up in animal skins like Vikings. That was one of their things. So they were reaching deep into symbolism, into the archetypes. They really wanted to, I think, tap into something deep in America's collective psyche, and they did. Because it was a guided tour, it was a frat party, it was bad performance art, it was a psyop. Ashley Babbitt's not dead. That whole thing has been exploded. In fact, we have two different short documentaries showing that Ashley Babbitt's not dead. But it doesn't matter. It's part of the narrative. In fact, Donald Trump sent the Babbitt family a posthumous birthday video message for her. So at her last birthday, being celebrated after her death, Donald Trump sends a personal message to her. And they really did this because I think they're creating a martyr. But I did some digging, and it turns out, and new stuff is coming out, Ashley Babbitt was a total psycho and tried to run over some other woman. I mean, really, you'll see. The Missing says, I watched Don't Look Up. It's like Rona in the Sky. Okay, so if you recall, the movie's about this green comet that's arriving and it breaks apart. Well, there was C-19, the Atlas comet, in the third quarter of 2019 that popped up right before 2020. We had this green comet in the sky. It was breaking up, and some scientists were speculating that that's where COVID came from. And I thought, you know what? It's almost like 2020 could have been either or. They could have said, oh, it's a virus, or oh, it's a comet coming to hit us, and then they could just take credit for shooting it down. It seems like the only limit as to like what they can accomplish is our incredulity. So we weren't quite ready for the space war, space defense system narrative yet, but we're definitely ready for the pandemic thing, and we were prepared. In fact, there's a few things about that. I mean, listen to these headlines. Car, bus, plane, building-sized asteroids to zoom past the Earth by January the 11th. So these are things that are just about to happen. Now, one other thing. You said the movie Don't Look Up is like Rona in the sky. You got to look at the cover of the Drudge Report today. The cover today has a globe, and it says The Last Wave, surrounded by COVIDs in space. Interesting image. And I've been discussing this for some time here, how there is a correlation that's been made between outer space, inner space, orbit, and circulation, between space junk and the unvaxxed, and the need to purify circulation and orbit. And moreover, the vax issue is on partisan lines, being predominantly left, whereas the anti vaxxers are on the right, and also the ones who are polluting outer space are the space cowboys who, politically, Bezos and Musk, they may be centrist, left, right, doesn't matter. They're engaging in space capitalism, which is inimical to the space communism because it's the thing that's causing the junk, causing all the problems, according to China and Beijing. But anyway, my point being, look here, right on the cover of the Drudge, they're combining these images. Now, when I first saw the image of the left's Lord and Savior, COVID-19, I mean, it's not their God is the globe, but their devil, and they worship their devil, is COVID-19. And when I first saw this thing, I remember saying, hey, you got to look at the iconography. It's not a coincidence that this thing looks like a globe covered in smoke with red mushroom clouds dotting its surface. It looks like communists waging World War III. And sure enough, this is what happened. And interestingly enough, in 2020, the first 2 weeks of August, you had multiple mushroom clouds with different explanations all over the globe, starting with the two on the anniversary of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the ones that happened in Beirut, mushroom clouds everywhere. But my point being, this looks like World War III, a perfect emblem, a conquered world. Now, one more thing, if you go back to the Economist cover from, and this is how you know the stuff is planned in advance, 2017, the cover is, it's actually the Christmas Eve cover, or the winter solstice cover, 2017, Sharp Power. And the Sharp Power it's basically a globe covered in spikes, which looks coincidentally like a COVID ball. And I don't believe this is a coincidence. And then what's more, the region of China is red. So it's kind of signifying Chinese power. And it says here, the new shape of Chinese influence. So 3 years before COVID, you have this COVID ball being projected. New shape, novel, Chinese influence, influenza, new flu from China, sharp power. I mean, this isn't the only predictive economist cover. These things are better than tarot cards. You can really read the future with these things. They encode, it's all predictive programming, but there's another one I could refer to that predicted the emergence of the QAnons and the right wing with the red hat, the MAGA crowd, totally predicted. But anyway, cover of the Drudge Report right now has a globe surrounded by COVID balls. Iconography and symbolism. It's beyond just marketing. All right, we've been joined here by Clockwork 113, Howard Boyd. Pete Trippa says, I'm just accepting all the blue-pilled people and I'm going along with the script. What more can I do? Masks going up around Boston. It's like Invasion of the Body Snatchers. You're totally outnumbered. Does it make sense to be the guy screaming on the corner, this is all a hoax? And is that even the way? I mean, I happen to think that the whole anti-vax movement is controlled by the pro-vaxxers. That's just how deep I think these deceptions go. And I think they do that to control the opposition and to get the opposition to self-censor, to walk into a trap. Marjorie Taylor Greene has been kicked permanently off of Twitter. For what? For retweeting just boring anti-vax propaganda that doesn't take into account that there's no such thing, that it's all a psyop. No, the problem with the anti-vaxxers is they're just as scared as the pro-vaxxers. They're just scared of different things. Anyway, it's controlled opposition. So she's getting banned. Then she gets kicked off Facebook. Rand Paul quitting social media, following her. They're all going to Getter, which I think is a mistake. I mean, and this is what happened with Parler. Do you remember last year with Parler or earlier this year? You had this platform for right wingers to run to where they could be free from all the oppressive Twitter Nazis, the Twatter bots that censor you and put warning labels on your memes. But as soon as they all congregated in Parler, Parler gets hacked and everyone's personal information gets released. And to get into Parler, if you didn't know, you actually do have to put some information up there that I would consider to be sensitive, like your driver's license, I believe. To be verified, you put your phone number at a minimum. So I think it was a big setup. And I don't think it's a coincidence that at the exact same time that Parler was being popularized and filled up by all these right wingers, and it was going to compete with the Twitter, you had this shooter in Atlanta, a racist right wing shooter with a fascist haircut, or a fasci haircut is what they call it. It's kind of like a sideways bowl cut, just a Nazi sign, a sign that they're Nazis. It's a new hate sign, like the bowl cut, according to the ADL. It's a hate symbol. Well, the fasci haircut guy, I think his name was it David Aaron Long, the guy who shot up the Parlors. Now, the Parlor shooter was a racist, right wing, internet radicalized incel type. So the fact that he was shooting up massage parlors is just part of the scripting for this psyop, because it allowed the media to continually put the face of Parler, they made it into the face of this racist shooter. Again, these are not coincidences, these are coordinated psyops. And so this was a way of, I think, smearing the site and its members. That's how sly the media is. Like, it's certainly not a coincidence, if you ask me. Not a coincidence that Kyle Rittenhouse is the name of a guy who was arrested on child porn on the same day that Kyle Rittenhouse was let out of jail. I mean, that was released, exonerated from the charges were dropped. It's like, wait, so he gets off, but then this other guy gets picked up and they have the same name. And if you search the name, it's all picking up the same stories. So it's kind of, if you ask me, this is just how the media likes to poison the well. It's part of their disinformation. Meanwhile, they're hysterical about what they consider to be misinformation from the other side. One of the things I mentioned today when I was talking to Create Earth USA is how the term conspiracy theorist is it's partisan, and all conspiracies are branded as right wing, like by default right wing. Like I'm not a winger. I'm not on a wing. And yet somehow if you go against the mainstream media, you're a right wing conspiracy theorist. Well, the left wing conspiracy theories just aren't considered conspiracy theories for some reason. And I thought today would be a good time to point this out, just or to illustrate just how fake and partisan things are. So if you're on team Kyle Rittenhouse, you're on the world stage. You're playing into their hands. Just like if you're on team Greta, I would say that these two are equivalent. If you're on team Kyle or team Greta, they've got you on their left-right mind control program here, this dialectic. And by the way, happy birthday. It's January the 3rd. Happy birthday to Kyle, to Greta, and to Bitcoin. Three birthdays today, and I just thought, again, what greater example of this split in our society than Kyle and Greta having the same exact birthday. And each one is evil to the other side. They're both very ambiguous characters. She has good intentions, but she's advocating for eco-fascism and the antithesis of freedom, locking down everybody. Kyle seems heroic, maybe, but I don't know. He was at Pudgy's being initiated into the Proud Boys. And that's if you accept his story as true. I happen to think that the whole thing was a psyop carried out with squibs. I still need to see Gross Arm without a long sleeve shirt on to make up my mind. Okay, let's go through the headlines today. Now, yeah, again, Jeff Bezos has said we have to choose a civilization of stasis or space faring. That's the future. That's what we're heading to. We're heading to a future of freedom for those who can afford to go into space. Meanwhile, it gets locked down on the Earth. Iniquitous Man says Parler symbol looks like the shekel from Israel. The Pirate Bay released an article stating the Parler shooter took a dive like Alex Jones. Yeah, I'd like to know more about that if you want to call in. One thing about the Parler shooting is that it happens pretty much on the anniversary of the Christchurch shooting. And both of these events involved racist, quote, right wing, anti immigrants going to multiple locations to carry out their shootings, two locations, and then being caught by being run off the road in a pit maneuver by the authorities and then dragged out of their cars. This happened like in the exact same way for both of these events. I don't think that's a coincidence. And speaking of things that aren't coincidences, this is something that was posted in Discord by David Pryor. This is from a movie called The Happening. And in the movie The Happening, it's about the air, being killer, like killer air is the thing. Anyway, the second area to be affected at 11:31 a.m. Interesting numbers there. Rittenhouse Park, Philadelphia. Rittenhouse Park. Bull Run says two heads of the same Hydra. Yeah, I would say so. I mean, the political divide in here in this country, everything is too perfect for it to be the result of carefully um, reasoned decision making. It's like you fall into Camp A or Camp B, Team A, Team B. Ghislaine Maxwell apparently requested a booster. So here's an article from, I know this has been picked up in a few places, but heart attacks can be deadly. Conspiracy theorists think that Ghislaine Maxwell will be suicided. So there you have it. Ghislaine Maxwell did not boost herself. Soylent Green took place in 2022. Just a heads up, I've been talking about this. And they've already introduced Astrocrete, which is a cement made from Martian soil and astronaut blood. So they're already talking about making bricks out of dead bodies. So it's just a few steps until it's like protein bars. Let's see here. I was watching, there's so many interesting topics here today. Let me go through the rest of the headlines and I'll get back to some of these things that I kind of earmarked. Meteor explosion may have caused Pittsburgh boom on New Year's Eve. Now, again, I don't think that these things are fake. I think they're getting people. I mean, I don't think these are real, but like I would say this could be faked. This could easily be a sonic boom. But I'm saying they're preparing the public for something because it's in the movies. The Space Force is doing the drills for satellites being shot down. We're being inundated with news reports about incoming. And then they have a sonic boom on New Year's when everybody's out and partying. And these stories trend. And this is all done for a reason. Here we go. NASA says asteroid 2.5 times the height of the Empire State Building will pass the Earth on January the 18th. Of course, the Empire State Building looking like a big vax needle. Probably not a coincidence. Probably not a coincidence. NASA warns at least 5 asteroids are heading towards the Earth in January. One is the size of Big Ben. This is a pattern. This is another thing they're picking up on too. Listen to this, because I think the agendas are changing very fast. I think 2020 was the year of the virus. 2021, vaxophobia versus vax sales, and the whole agenda just being passed. But now, I think the new thing is going to be climate lockdowns, which was the topic in 2019. So the Nation.Wales put the story out. COVID conspiracy groups may switch to climate misinformation. So now that they have thoroughly censored anything as deemed medical misinformation and science misinformation using flat earth and now the vax thing, well, the next thing is how do we get people to stop talking about the global warming hoax, which is a conspiracy theory, but they'll say it's real. It's a 33-year-old conspiracy theory, and they're constantly moving the goalpost. Ocean levels have not risen, not even from the billion of discarded COVID-infected masks thoughtlessly discarded into the oceans. Has not risen an inch. COVID conspiracy groups may switch to climate misinformation. Well, look, we were doing climate misinformation before COVID, and so before it becomes fashionable again, we've already been there. We've already figured this hoax out. And this is again, I brought up Greta today. Well, Greta Thunberg came out as the face of the climate agenda. How dare you, that whole speech. And this is something else worth noting. Greta Thunberg is actually the basis for Elsa in Disney's Frozen. So here you have a cartoon, and it's Disney's Frozen 2. You have a cartoon targeted at the youth, and they actually encode her. It says young audience may draw parallels between Elsa and Greta Thunberg. Right. Oh, Disney slammed for selling plastic Frozen 2 toys. Yeah, I love it when they eat their own. They can never live up to their own high standards. I mean, here they are putting out this massive mind control film targeting the youth, doing the job of the environmentalists for them, and they get criticized for plastic toys. Greta Thunberg is Person of the Year, and Disney's accused of. Here we go. There are so many of these. I think it's disingenuous. But when I first saw Elsa with the blonde hair and the long braid, I saw the toys in this drugstore. I thought, looks a little too much like Greta. Well, here you have it from the Telegraph. Frozen 2, Disney sequels environmental message for the Greta Thunberg generation. So there you have it. Brainwashing. They don't even hide it. And what's more, I mean, you can dig into these characters, and Disney does it all the time. They prepare you for things. Even Rapunzel. Rapunzel's a character that looks like Greta who lives in a tower on Corona Island. And she's on lockdown. She's on quarantine. There's a Saint Corona who looks like Greta, very long braids. And I think Saint Corona is the patroness of plagues. I don't know if there's any people who know about Catholic saints, but yes, Saint Corona, patroness of plagues. And there is a saint named after Kyle, although it's a nun. Not that it rules it out necessarily. Here we go. Is Saint Corona really the patron saint of plagues, the saint of epidemics? But I was saying, just look at her image and tell me it doesn't look like Greta. 100%. And then behind her head, you have the shining sun, which again, it's another Corona reference. Very interesting. Iniquitous Man says, Kyle gives me bad vibes. He says he supports the BLM. Well, he means that he supports their right to protest, which I do as well. I mean, I do support protesting, but I don't pretend to conflate protesting with riots. And what went down in Kenosha was not a BLM protest. It was a bunch of rioters burning stuff down. It wasn't really a... And that, you notice he didn't shoot any BLM members. But I mean, it's kind of... At this point, I don't even know if there's any point in bringing it up, but yeah, BLM is obviously just the vanguard of a communist revolution, fodder, cannon fodder, useful idiots and stooges. All right, so let me go through headlines again. Elon Musk's Starlink satellite dishes are attracting cats. So yeah, apparently the Starlink internet dishes, so you can get your internet from low Earth orbit supposedly, and it's the CubeSats that were endangering the Chinese space station, according to this story in this fictional universe. But the Starlink internet dishes are actually kind of warm, and cats are huddling on these things in the cold. Lean Dion says reportedly Greta's grandparents were involved at the start of the climate change agenda. Wouldn't surprise me. Another person of interest in this regard would be Leonardo DiCaprio. He's got his own environmentalist movement. He hangs out with Greta. He's part of the World War Zero cut your carbon footprint thing. And the Titanic was always used, it's been used rather, as a metaphor for the West or for America and global warming. And that we're about to hit this iceberg and we're sinking, but everybody's too busy rearranging deck chairs and partying to consider the fact that we're all sinking. And so for DiCaprio to be the face of Don't Look Up, in which the Earth is the Titanic and the comet is the iceberg, is not a coincidence, because the moral of the story is listen to your scientists. Don't look up is kind of being sarcastic as well. It means look up, pay attention, listen to your scientists. Listen to your high priests. hundreds of miles above your head, telling you, hey, look, this isn't going to go well. This isn't going to end well. We need to change our ways. Now, of course, they're all doing it from a movie studio, so they don't have any weight with me, but for the public, yes, this is your high priesthood. Let's see here. Lean Dion says, I think St. Corona's for lost treasure and looting. That would be consistent with 2020. And in 2020, we really got the introduction of the A Better China agenda, which is an anagram for I can't breathe. And I can't breathe beyond just BLM has been applied to this climate agenda, and I'm seeing it in almost every single movie that I watch on Netflix that has to do with this predictive programming for space stations falling and space wars and a post reset age where in nearly every single show, in fact, I was just watching Electric Dreams, it's like we're going to run out of air in this underground base or on the space station. They're going to run out of air, so they have to jettison the prisoners. It's always about we can't breathe, there's not enough air. And you know, at Astro World, the people were being crushed and they were screaming, we can't breathe, I can't breathe. And they're being represented by George Floyd's attorney or the family's attorney. The I can't breathe thing, it's all just code, if you ask me, for you can't breathe because of the police oppression, which is the police, of course, are an instrument of the wealthy elite that control the fascist system. So you're talking about oppression, then you're talking about the environment being destroyed by the same system, so we can't breathe. They've correlated these things on purpose. Then, of course, during the whole year, you had the COVID thing, the ventilators, the masks, and even 5G conspiracy theories, all pointing to humanity being suffocated. Then you had Dwayne Wright, the other death that happened down the street from where Floyd was supposedly killed. And in his case, he was pulled over because of an air freshener on his window. I mean, we couldn't get away from it last year. They were really impressing, well, in 2020, impressing upon us this I can't breathe narrative, and it hasn't gone away. And I'm seeing it, like I said, in a lot of these movies where it's coming down to too many breathers, not enough air. All right, let us move on. So I'm just pointing this out that the conspiracy groups are now expected to be moving to climate misinformation. Anti-vaxxer linked to Freemasons hall arson. So here's another person burning a Masonic lodge, and this happened on New Year's Eve, but now they're saying it's an anti-vaxxer that did it. So you have an anti-vaxxer arsonist burning down a Masonic lodge. Last March, it was a anti-Freemason flat earther, friend of Mac Parhar, who may have died of COVID, if you believe that story. Anyway, another example, I think, of a psyop, probably an inside job. Okay, here we go. It says, it is believed that the attack on the Freemasons Hall in Dublin on New Year's Eve may have been inspired by anti-vax conspiracy theories. Graffiti was found on the pavement nearby, accusing the Masons of being part of a global conspiracy and describing the pandemic as a hoax. Now, this again is interesting to me how you don't have anybody taking credit for it. Like this is some kind of a terror attack, it's a statement. What about all the 5G towers that were burned? Nobody comes forth to say they did it. And it's the same thing with all the fake terror attacks, if you remember. If nobody's coming out to take credit for it, then it's probably fake. And I think these are all staged because they're trying to impress upon the public that people who associate the news with psyops and hoaxes are somehow dangerous. Like heretics. And again, the narrative has been you are dangerous because misinformation is deadly. All right, 5 asteroids heading towards the Earth. Like, why is misinformation deadly? Like, how come this is not considered to be deadly misinformation? You're telling people rocks may fall from the sky and they could kill you. It could disrupt our infrastructure. Like, they're basically doing the equivalent of crying out fire in a crowded theater. Again, on the 6th, which is Thursday, just a heads up here, there's going to be a simultaneous set of speeches, one from Biden and the other from Trump. So we're going to have a split screen moment. Trump's going to be at Mar-a-Lago, and he's going to be talking about how the election was stolen or something. And then Biden is going to be on the other side talking about how the guy with the spear almost destroyed democracy last year. So we have to have a moment of silence. And again, this is such a hideous joke. I was watching it live and I thought it was comical. I really did. At no point did it seem like anything because I had watched the riots in 2020, police precincts burning, people getting run over. Then I don't know how many times I watched Kenosha and all these other events under a magnifying glass. We paid close attention to the violence. Commenter says Google Russia rocket out of control. There's a live stream regarding it. Let's take a look. And as I said last night and the day before, there are drills being conducted right now by Space Force for if Russia and China were to attack us in any way. Here we go. Out of control. Russian rocket could strike on Wednesday. That's tomorrow. Thanks for the lead, Linda Curtis. This is from weatherboy.com. Out of control Russian rocket. So this is the theme on every major movie, TV show, series on Netflix. It's out there in the memosphere. They're drawing your attention to the skies at all times. They're warning us, oh yeah, there's 5, there's 10, there's a whole lot of gigantic vax needle-shaped rocks about to hit the Earth. And now we have it, January 2nd, 2022. So this is from yesterday. Out of control Russian rocket will strike on Wednesday. All right, let me see here. There's a re-entry forecast. So earlier this year, it was the out of control booster from China, and that was, of course, from the launch that took the first module for their space station up. Okay, while Angara's first 2 stages fired as planned, the third stage, a Percy rocket, failed to fire the second time. While the first fire helped put the dummy payload into orbit, the second fire failed to put the dummy payload into geostationary orbit. Okay, well that gives us, according to the report here, it's a 20-ton mass tumbling down to Earth out of control. According to the North American Aerospace Defense Command, NORAD, the tumbling rocket and payload numbered 50505 is going to, let's see here, where is it going to hit? Well, it says here most of it's going to burn up in the atmosphere, but the leftovers, we don't know. That's still a question. So just a heads up, and it says this is not the first time an out-of-control rocket threatened the United States. In May, it was the Long March 5. Now, a couple of things about the Long March 5. The main stage tumbled back to Earth in an uncontrolled manner. Now, that whole event, I believe, was staged, just theater, but it was in May. In May of 2020, there was a drill being carried out. No, actually, it's May of 2019. There's a drill being carried out for Chinese space junk coming down to Earth. In fact, it was a drill conducted with FEMA, the ESA, NASA, all working together. And they had this thing called the fictional event where they were live tweeting some object coming down from space. And so then a year after that drill, a piece of space junk almost hits New York. We almost had a space 9/11 courtesy of China. And then 1 year after, the Long March 5, again in May. So that's 3 years in a row. We've had major events at the same time. And my contention here is that they use the drills, the simulations, the fictional events in order to get all of their assets and materials in place, whatever they need, crisis actors. They put everybody on alert and they get them ready so that when they do the real thing, which, well, the drill that the public will believe is real, they're able to carry it off very smoothly. Let's see, I'm going through comments. Thirst for Truth says, call Mac and see if he knows him too. Oh, call Mac Parhar and see if he knows the other arsonist who burned the Masonic Lodge. I thought that stood out when Mac Parhar said he knew the guy that was burning the Masonic Lodges, and he wouldn't condemn those actions. He said, well, maybe he just snapped from being locked down. It's like the guy looked like a basement dweller. I don't think he was mad about being told to stay home and be happy with the stimmy check. It just didn't add up to me. By the way, I don't think Mac Parhar is dead, so Happy New Year, Mac Parhar, which is an anagram for Pharmaca, which is the Greek sacrifice or exile or scapegoat used to demonstrate all the bad things that you don't want in society so you can kick them out. And so he's the face of the anti-vaxxing flat earth COVID denier. And that's why he had such media coverage. His life for the last 6 months was a reality TV show. But I knew it was a psyop because of the timing of the death. It was the same day that Joe Rogan was telling Aaron Rodgers and Tim Pool to boof the ivermectin to cure them of the COVID, which I don't believe in. And apparently, Mac was doing the ivermectin, which is weird because he's a COVID denier. He's giving some to his dog, having some for himself, and then he dies, supposedly. Again, I'm very skeptical. I haven't seen any evidence. All right, I'm going through the comments. I want to say thanks everyone for joining here on the main YouTube channel. I've got 737 who want to call in. It's 833-311-1984. Russian rocket out of control. So that's going to be tomorrow. Don't look up. Greta DiCaprio says OG Fepe. Ink G says, so many of these metascripts were covered by the Twilight Zone back in the 60s. Yeah, I agree. And the Twilight Zone, like the X-Files, it's about the fringe. It's that area beyond what the public knows. And that area is what they now call dangerous misinformation. So we are in the Twilight Zone every night. That's what Infinite Plane Radio is. We're on the fringe for the most part. But they designated the fringe. But then they eliminate what's on the fringe, the so-called borderline content, shrinking the universe of ideas. So they banned flat earth, doesn't exist. Then they ban COVID denial, doesn't exist. Everybody's on the same sheet. Next, they're going to ban global warming denial. Now everybody believes in global warming. And that's what they're doing. They're reducing the world of ideas to protect you from bad ideas, because it's not okay to be wrong. Not in the new age. Wrong answers will not be tolerated. AK All Day says Russian rocket's going to land in someone's bed. Angst G says this reality has jumped the shark. That happened a long time ago. Humanity did in 2020. When people started dressing in garbage bags and putting plastic water bottles over their faces, when people started making their own PPE so they could go buy crap they didn't need, just violating all common sense, I realized, okay, fine. We're in the Twilight Zone. Like, who are they to call us conspiracy theorists? That's what all the conspiracy theorists were saying. You call us tinfoil hatters, but look what they're doing. But yes, I'm looking forward to it. A Russian rocket falling down from the sky. Let's take another look. Now again, look at the cover of the Drudge Report. It's got the globe surrounded in red spiked balls, the COVIDs. Symbol, I think, of world domination. And now we're dealing with space war. Space war is the dominant narrative today. And that is what Don't Look Up is about. It's about how the space capitalists will destroy us all. We can't have that. So we got to act now. That's why you have Bezos on his $500 million mega yacht, strutting around with all of his concubines and servants. They're trying to show you, hey, look, we are on the Titanic. We're on the Titanic and we're heading into danger. There's a very, I think, easy to read subtext in all of this. So let me go ahead and take a look here. We're talking about Russian rocket out of control. Now, the other question here is this an accident? And many were making this connection back in May with the Chinese space junk. Wait a minute, was it an accident? Did somebody forget to heat up their bat soup to 160 degrees? Was it a legitimate accident that the virus spread, or was it deliberate? A lot of people are asking still. The people who believe that there is a thing, they're debating, well, was it an accident made with, or an intentional act with plausible deniability? Well, the same was asked about the out-of-control space junk. Are they testing us? In fact, China said the same thing about Musk's 2 CubeSats that almost took out its space station. Could this have been some kind of a provocation? Out of control, Russian rocket could strike on Wednesday. Out of control rocket. Let me see here. So many of them. Big rockets, massive asteroids, more space highlights. All right, well, I'll be looking forward to this. I'm not really sure where it's going to hit or when. They haven't given us any specifics. Now, all they need to do to fake it, of course, is show it on TV. Just like the fireworks show, they augment these things now with CGI, and people don't know the difference because they're only looking through their screens. 833-311-1984. Phones are open. Turning on the ringer right now. Let me see if I have any voicemails. You can leave voicemails 24/7, and I will get to those. I generally play them live, so if I don't get to you, just leave a message. Let me see if we have any. These last few nights we've been talking about the coming year, what people expect, and it's pretty unanimous. People are ready. This is the year that they they pull off everything that they've been preparing us for. Just like if we had been more critical, a little more, I think, aware of just how predictive the mass media was, in 2019, we would have read 2020 in advance. I mean, most of us here did. I've been talking a lot about the movie Utopia, which tells you everything. And the movie Utopia is a great place to start if you want to show someone an example of what we mean by predictive programming, because that's one of the major plots in that movie. One of the major plots is people reading comics are discerning actual news being forecasted, viral breakouts in the comics that actually correlate to what really happened, showing pre-planning. So they obsess over the new issue that's unreleased because presumably they can read the future with this thing. They'll know what's coming. So they manage to get their hands on a copy, but it's such sensitive material that the Bill Gates like character in the movie sends out, like Men in Black style. Since they saw too much, they have to be silenced. Their minds have to be erased. Here's an article. What if Bennu hit the Earth? Bennu the asteroid has a better probability of reaching us in 2300. So they like talking about the end of the world, don't they? Now, Bennu, just for context, is the one that was being visited by Osiris Rex, another one of these sun god names. But the name Bennu itself is also worth noting because we're talking about the destruction of the world. In all these things, we're talking about the world being destroyed. So the reason why they would use a name like Bennu, if you ask me, is that is the original phoenix. It's an ancient Egyptian deity linked with the sun, creation, and rebirth. When you hear rebirth, it's reset. So this is the inspiration for the Phoenix legends. Again, Bennu. And just a regular headline, nothing to see here. What if Bennu hits the Earth? Well, I guess it's a reset. I guess we have to start over. Your mama says Rick and Morty is depraved. It's frightening how many people enjoy that show. I watch all of the television, everything that I watch, aware of the fact that it's propaganda and programming. I mean, I still do, enjoy the content. I like good art, good acting, etc. But the agendas are too obvious and they're too similar across various shows. It's all like we're running out of air, not enough resources, too many people, and women in charge is the new thing in all the movies. From the 100, Wheel of Time, uh, the other one was Raised by Wolves, and I have no issue with that whatsoever. But it's such an obvious and overt agenda here that it reminds me of all the pre 9/11 predictive programming. So they're preparing us, I think, for President Harris. I think that's part of the programming, and it's like I said, it's too pervasive to be coincidental. This is from Indy 100. It's not just flat earthers; there are also the donut earthers. Yeah, actually, I've known about this. They usually say something else. I believe they say, what is the term they use for the donut earth? Toroidal field earther? I'm not sure, but electric universers or something. But yeah, I think Bob Nodal from Globebusters is actually a donut earther. And I noticed it back then. I was like, okay, well, he's really into the donut earth. No, I don't have a problem with that one. There's no dome on it. Anyway, this is a breakdown of what donut Earth is. So, unlike flat earthers who think the planet is flat, those who believe in the donut Earth think it's shaped like a donut. The scientific name for a ring donut shape is torus shaped, and some believe we inhabit a planet that has a gigantic hole in the center of it. So in 2008, a theory appeared. Here we go. The tastiest celestial body of our super glazed planet Earth. Right, they make memes about it. Now, the scientists, though, have looked into it, and they said that if you had a torus shaped Earth, you couldn't have night and day as we know it, or sunrises and sunsets. Now, whenever the scientists debunk these models, they arrive at it from a heliocentric bias. So they automatically think of it as a shape in space with a distant, massive sun, relatively much larger. But the flat Earth concept has it that the Earth is the big object and that the luminaries are small by comparison, that these are local lights. So that's not a good debunk necessarily. It does say that the clouds on a donut-shaped planet could be up to 3 times taller than on our Earth, and gravity would be weaker on the inside and on the outside. And those living near the central hole would experience multiple seasons, meaning in theory it could snap into winter in the middle of July. Do we have any donut earthers in the chat? Thirst for Truth says there's a random, meaningless Nelson Mandela quote in the Utopia. I hope the affectees are going to think they're getting trolled again. I noticed that one. I have a Mandela quote. I think it's everything's impossible until it's not, which I don't really know what that even means. But the Mandela effect is kind of competing right now with the Pope Della. I think that's what you'd call it. There's a lot of people who remember the Pope dying on Christmas. Do we have any people here who remember the Pope dying on Christmas of 2021? It was reported, here we go. Yes, ITV announces the Pope's death on Christmas. During a Christmas Day bulletin, news anchor announces Pope Francis's death, ITV. Popculture.com, December 25th, 2021, 9:48 Eastern Time. Pope Francis's Christmas speech highlighted by reports of his death. Okay, so you can say it was a mistake. But really, if enough people believe it, according to the Mandela effect theory, then it's debatable. Do we live in a world where he died, where he's alive and he shouldn't be, or he's dead and he shouldn't be? So, again, the Mandela effect started in the exact same way. The strange thing about the Mandela effectees, though, is that given that most of their effects are based upon cultural artifacts from the 80s, 90s, and some from, like, what, Lassie, did Timmy fall down the well, for example. These are old references. So you don't have a lot of new converts. So this is probably why the people who believe that the Pope died are going to outnumber the people who misremembered the death of Mandela. You see what I mean? You're going to have a breakaway. I mean, if the effect is legitimate, it'll continue. It'll just have different focal points. It might not always be the Mandela effect, but it can't just go away. There's no way that the Mandela effect itself, this glitching of reality, would disappear if it's a real thing. Now, if it's some kind of made-up intelligence agency psyop just to troll people who look too closely into things, then you would expect it to go away. And I've had that as my opinion for the longest time. It just seems like the way that people arrive at these Mandela effect memories reminds me of interrogation, faulty eyewitness testimony, how bad cops could actually get people to give bad confessions, or even have them think they're giving the right answers. But my point being, it's a manipulation. So I'm not a believer in the Mandela effect. But anyway, my point being, there's no way it can stick around unless they come up with some way to invent new ones. And there really haven't been any, except for this Pope thing. All right, let's see here. Maxwell says there is a Showtime show called Yellow Jackets about a girls' soccer team whose plane crashes in Canada based on Lord of the Flies. Well, the show on Netflix called 100, which has the space station crashing, It has the Lord of Flies aspect to it as well because there's no adults. And one of the things with the mud flood theory, this notion of resets, is that they wipe out the populations and then they have a repopulating phase where it's the youth. Like the Lord of the Flies story. And that's a reoccurring theme. And you think about Greta, what she represents, this youth revolution, because it's the older generation that brought about the climate change. It's the older generation that has doomed everybody else, so they're actually enemies of the future generations. So it's really the youth have to take over. Let's see, Maxwell says they devote it to cannibalism, and 20 years later, one of the four main characters is a black lesbian running for Senate. Yeah, right, exactly. And I think it's sort of the same. That's what I'm pointing out here. That they choose these characters because these characters are influence agents. You may not look at them as, I mean, this is celebrity worship in a way. People model themselves off of what they see on TV, and they're setting people's expectations. Let's see what we have here. Not Cute says the Pope had a black eye when he shouldn't have. What was his excuse? Yeah, he's probably in the Black Eye Club. And I've looked at the available membership rosters of the memes of the Black Eye Club members. And it's pretty much anybody who's anybody in politics, in the movies. They're either covering one eye. I mean, if you look at 90% of the pictures of Greta, have her covering one eye. Even a photo of her with her parents when she was like a 3-year-old or something. She's doing the AOK symbol over one eye. So, yep, here we have it. The Pope, it looks like Boy George and Elizabeth Hurley all got inducted at the same time. And he has a big smile on his face. Like, that's not normal. If you have some unsightly wound on your face, you're not going to go out for a photo op, especially if you're someone like the Pope. Now, the only person who should, I imagine, would be the Queen. I've noticed that the Queen is conspicuously absent from all of the Black Eye Club memes, which leads me to suspect that she might be the one slugging everybody. Maybe she uses a scepter. All right, phones are open, 833-311-1984. Just turn the ringer on. Thank you for your patience there. If you missed it, I was on this morning with Crater Earth USA. And if you want, I can play that right after this because I am setting up the 24/7 stream. So let me go ahead and make sure everyone has a link to that. Again, Crater Earth USA will be live in the mornings on Dark Matter Radio, as will I, most likely before or usually after. But this was a conversation we had planned on having for some time. So it's a good introduction to his channel and what he covers. And of course, we covered a lot of ground. He asked a lot of questions about this channel. So if there are things you don't know about Infinite Plane Society, where we came from, etc., you'll probably learn some things there. Listen to this fake story because I brought up Leonardo DiCaprio and how his role is in many ways referencing the Titanic for purely propaganda purposes. It's not overt, just his presence there. And then there's a parallel between the iceberg and the comet, the Earth and the Titanic. So listen to this. Leonardo DiCaprio had a Titanic style dive. He had to save his dogs. He dove into a frozen lake. Titanic style, again referencing the movie, dive into an icy lake to save dogs. Does this even make sense? Jennifer Lawrence's co-star said one of his dogs fell in and Leonardo jumped in the frozen lake to save the dog. So there you have it. Again, they said here, this is clearly a thing he learned after playing Jack in the Titanic. This happened a couple weeks ago. So I think this is just a way that they bring up, again, they bring it into the conversation. Oh, by the way, this guy is associated with the Titanic. Again, I'm looking at this from a very Metascript perspective, and when I see Jeff Bezos lounging around on his $42,000 per week yacht, yes, this is a Titanic image that they're trying to give you. The richest man in the world on this sinking Titanic Earth, a guy who's been to space, who has seen the Earth, Still doesn't seem to give a damn because he's too busy being entertained. And then you see a picture of Bezos with his heart-shaped sunglasses in his disco costume for New Year's. And it really does highlight how disconnected they are from the danger they have put us in. And for all intents and purposes, the space popes are the captains of Spaceship Earth. Crystallized urine and space debris set to cause a lot of trouble for NASA. So they're taking this environmentalist agenda into the universe. Listen to this one. This doesn't surprise me at all. This is from Montreal, Quebec. Constantly worrying about the coronavirus pandemic not only stresses you out, but it can impair your cognitive abilities as well, a new study warns. This is from studyfinds.org. It says stop worrying about COVID because of a mental decline. Researchers from McGill University found that people who dwell on pandemic-related fears make poorer choices, miscalculate the risks of certain outcomes, and display slower mental processing speeds. So I know what came first. Do they immerse themselves in pandemic propaganda because they have slower mental processing speeds and they make poor choices? Or did the propaganda make them into slow NPCs who can't think for themselves? I mean, I don't know. It's one of these chicken or egg type story questions. All right, let's see. Continuing. Someone posted this meme, and I was like, yep, finally somebody pinpointed where this guy came from. Pete Davidson, the guy who's dating Kim Kardashian, this is your celebrity news of the day, looks a lot like Beetlejuice for some reason. It's the hair, I guess. And I don't think it's just that picture. I don't think there's any deeper meaning to it. But when you're immersed in this stuff, it's hard not to notice these patterns. Again, probably doesn't mean anything. Now, this does mean something. Trax A Million hip hop producer and pioneer dies in Santa Clara at 42. So, this is a very common thing here. And this was picked up by Gematria Effect News. The number 42, like the number 33, is extremely significant in all of these major psyops. That's why, I mentioned these numbers, the dates. These things do matter. And the number 42 we've talked about at length and how integrated it is into the major psyops of our time. So for a Trax A Million hip hop producer to die at 42, yeah, I suspect it's probably a death hoax. But a new thing that's happening is ever since we've been calling out the patterns, they've been changing the age to 43. They've done this a few times. They started this with Chadwick Boseman because it would have been too obvious. You had Chadwick Boseman dying at 42. At the same time, his movie Black Panther is out. And then Jackie Robinson, the character he played in the movie, the baseball player, is being honored by the MLB that week. So the MLB, the Major League Baseball, are all wearing 42s. That week was Mamba Week. They were celebrating the posthumous birthday, the 42nd birthday of Kobe Bryant, who died that year. And then Chadwick Boseman had his Operation 4-2, where he was raising $4.2 million to fight COVID. That's going on. And this is all happening the week of Kenosha. So then the NBA is having, again, Mamba Week. MLB, 42. Kobe Bryant dies, Mr. 42. And they changed his birthday to 43 because the pattern was getting too obvious. And again, these are things we can point out that show you that there is indeed a meta script here. And this is why I would say that TMZ put 43. They're trying to conceal their tracks, but it's a little too late. Not falling for that. All right, let's see. If you look at the thumbnail tonight, the image is Kyle on the left, Greta on the right, and then you have Scott Kelly. This is one of the astronauts, and he's superimposed over Chris Angel, the magician who levitates. We were talking about how this media matrix is just basically a magic show, and Chris Angel is a guy who levitates on TV. So it can't be fake, can it? No, it has to be real. It's on a screen. I mean, that's people's standard of evidence. But no, clearly that's a magic show. But I'm just pointing that out that what they can show us, what the high priests show us as far as their actual magic powers, the most they can do, their highest thing is this levitation ritual. And it's not that impressive. Chris Angel's far more impressive. And then on the left there you have, it's a Pfizer girl meme. Someone actually got a tramp stamp of Pfizer, but someone superimposed. I hope that's a superimposition. Dr. Fauci's face. Let's talk about Dr. Fauci's name for a moment. Somewhere I read that Fauci means sickle, like the Grim Reaper or death. And then also, you can rearrange the letters Dr. Fauci if you take the F and you bend that into an A just by pointing the two horizontal bars down like a couple fangs. And you can actually spell Dracula. Just a couple side notes there. And Dr. Fauci is one of these characters that has a historical precedent, like the Dr. Fauci of the Spanish flu. Have you seen this? You've all seen the picture of Greta from like 120 years ago. But you do have the Dr. Fauci of the 1918 Spanish flu. Now, this could be made up. This could be Ministry of Truth style fabrication. The Manduzel effect our news media. But if you look, this individual looks exactly like Dr. Fauci. More than a century ago, epidemiologist Dr. Thomas Tuttle prescribed face masks. So the person who first prescribed face masks and social distancing was Dr. Thomas Tuttle. And he made a lot of enemies. He was hated for it. So it's kind of fascinating here that you have this historical role being repeated. History rhymes, it repeats, it recycles. They recycle crisis actors all the time. So this is not at all, to me, a surprise. I think A, it's all an act, or B, they backdated a fake news story. Infinite Plane Radio. Hey, what's up, caller? Can you hear me okay? Just hang on just 1 second. I want to make sure my audio settings are up. All right, caller. Hey, you may want to remove your masks.
Mine's good.
Okay, good. Gotcha. It is a bit muffled there. So what got your attention tonight? We've been covering a lot of things. Mostly there's a rocket from Russia about to hit. Do you have a preference on where that lands?
It could land on Israel.
They got the Iron Dome, so, but yeah, I mean, look, it could. I I happen to think it's
Yeah, but
intentional.
the Iron Dome's a fireworks show, so probably won't do a lot of good.
Well, the rocket too would be a fireworks show, right? I mean,
Most
do you
likely.
believe any of this stuff? Do you believe in space air defense or space defense that asteroids are going to come down, that they can shoot that stuff down? Do you believe in asteroids?
Uh, no, I do. I don't understand what a falling star would be, but I do understand there are phenomena that we can't explain, but the reasons that we're given are probably untrue. Like you'd actually brought up the dinosaur programming, and that the it's something that we get attached to, and then it all comes to an end by a meteor, right? And so that's probably the
Yes,
bigger
yes.
subliminal lesson.
How, as a
It's
kid, the
very
first thing you're taught
sneaky.
about is extinction by falling rock.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah. No, I'm iniquitous man in the chat, and then you're like, just call in. But yeah, my name's Joey, and my brother Vinny from Goyim TV, he told me to come check you out a couple weeks ago, and I dig it, man. I'm
Goyim
into the
TV, is that on D?
etymology. And
Are you guys on D Live or YouTube?
no, that was Handsome Truth. He used to be on YouTube, and then he got banned from D Live. He was like one of the first people to get banned from D Live, so we had to create our own platform. It's
Okay,
GoyimTV.tv.
see, I've been there before. I remember it was recommended to me when D Live started, and interestingly enough, in that time, D Live has actually demonetized our channel because of the 1/6 thing and my criticism of the 1/6 guided tour. So they totally stab their content creators in the back if you don't toe the party line. And I'm all about the free speech, and people discussing ideas openly. And I don't like this idea that we're all being forced to scurry to these private platforms. We should, but anyway, that's kind of a
Yeah,
side note.
before the DLive censorship started, we were going into the streets. We did the second Name the Nose tour in Colorado, and we had a bullhorn, and we were doing banner drops, and Antifa called it in, and they shut down all our live streaming capabilities, and that was really one of the first DLive censorships ever.
So
I think that was
could you call
in
it name the nose?
2019.
Is this a I'm starting to get the
Yeah,
okay, so let me
yeah,
guess.
yeah,
So
yeah,
you do this like
yeah.
anti-Israel thing, and that's kind of weird that Antifa would be against you. But because that always struck me as kind of strange. Are you like are you a socialist?
Well, we would say that Antifa is a Jewish militia all the way from Weimar, Germany, right? And it's just rebranded after Weather Underground and taking a rise here in communist America.
Yeah, I figured it was Weather Underground who said that they were going to use the Black Panthers as their vanguard, and so that's your Antifa BLM relationship explained. But like on your part, where you're coming from with your organization, are you a is it na is it was it National
Well, I
Socialists?
used to. Um, it's kind of grown to that because I would say it's been a long journey for me. I started out. This is me personally. I can't speak for everyone. We don't always agree. We actually have. We're generally pretty open with ideas. I like that. In our group, we have different personalities and whatnot. But for me, um, I got into false flags, then psyops. Um, then I would say J naming, and then uh, National Socialism, and now kind of like the white identity thing because of a looming white genocide. It appears things that you never expect to ever identify with, but that's just kind of
Then
the
let me
path
ask you
I've
this thing, because I
taken.
find this to be fascinating. Last year in 2020, we had Antifa riots everywhere, and then you had the McCloskeys come out in front of their mansion. You know that rich couple. I'm pretty sure they
Yeah,
pointed their
yeah,
weapons.
they
Now,
look they look strange.
well, if you look at them, they stepped right off of the cover of the book, The Turner Diaries. And again, their clothing,
Mm.
their demeanor, and their weapons. And the Turner Diaries is about this race war where or rather the white nationalists decide to nuke everybody else or something like that. It's kind of this, Timothy McVeigh was heavily inspired by this. But so when you say white genocide, is this coming out of the Turner Diaries narrative?
No, it's just observations that the white there's no such thing as a white country anymore, right? Like that doesn't exist anywhere in the world. I mean, if you go far enough north into like Scandinavia, things like that still exist. But even like I think it was like Iceland or something, they tried to ban circumcision, and they flew they flew a rabbi from New York to go have a consultation with them, and they told them that they had to um, basically retract that what they were voting against, or that they would make it where America wouldn't do business. So why does a random rabbi from New York have enough power to
I
decide if
haven't quite heard of that,
America
but
is going to do
now
business
on this channel, we generally
with
don't go
Iceland?
on this channel. I mean, I understand where you're coming from, racial collectivism, which I'm not really a believer in that necessarily. It just seems like it fits into the whole Darwinian modern scientism religion. I think that
Mhm.
and I even think that the concept of white genocide is actually sort of like a victim mentality thing, kind of like what the liberals do, where they're always oppressed, but nobody believes them. Like, I don't know if I believe it, but what is your opinion on like the shape of the world, for example? Do you think there's a big lie being perpetrated about that, or do you buy the whole globe thing?
No, I'm a flat earther. Yeah, I actually respect Eric Dubay a lot because not a lot like in the kind of the nationalist movement that there's a very split right there. There's like a really hard split,
Okay,
and
wait,
you
Eric
were talking
Dubay
about
got kicked off YouTube because he
yeah.
uploaded Jew
Hmm.
World Order and the one that was like Europe for Europeans. And I'm like, why is this white nationalist who advocates ethnic solidarity on a continental level, why is he in Thailand? Why isn't he in Europe making white babies?
Well, I
Doesn't
wouldn't
that seem
say
like a
he.
contradiction?
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. And then he even dated a woman in Thailand. I wouldn't say he probably was a white nationalist. He just came to the conclusion that Hitler was right, which would be a little less extreme. The point being why I brought up Iceland was just the power that this group has. It seems like um, they advocate, while they're in Israel, they kind of want their own ethno state. But when they're over in America or Europe, it doesn't really matter. South Africa, all of these countries, they're the NGOs like Highest that want diversity, and they're the ones importing. You could go back to the Hart-Celler Act in America, like the idea of an
The
ethno
Cloward
state
Piven
sounds
strategy.
really.
Yes, I think we all understand the Cloward Piven strategy, and I talked about that before. The build the wall. They never built the wall, but I happen to think that kind of like the vaccine discussion or debate, I think the wall is another one of these things where it's really not about what they say it's about, but it's about the
Wall's a
schism.
joke.
Well, look, for example, it's not a coincidence that the right wing, and this is just general, but you're going to find that the anti-vax sentiment comes from the right, and they're also pro Second Amendment, and they're also pro strong border. The left is open border, open skinned, anti gun. So it has to do with one's relationship to power and collectivism versus individual responsibility. So I don't really see that immigration issue as a real issue. That's why I don't really take this ethno nationalism thing very seriously. I think it's all controlled opposition. And I even think white nationalism based on, like what you're describing to me, it makes sense on a globe with scarcity. But if the world is flat, a lot of this stuff doesn't make sense. It really wouldn't. Do you think that, what do you, like,
Well,
for
if,
example, you say you believe the earth is flat. What is
mhm.
beyond 69 degrees south all around? What's beyond this so-called Antarctica?
Who knows? Who knows, man? Because I like the idea of more land. I like the idea of infinite consciousness. Consciousness could be an infinite plane. I don't know, man. I'm agnostic on that, but
But I mean, if there's
yeah,
more
it all makes
land, what does
sense to me.
what does a
Yeah,
little tiny spot called Israel mean in the big picture? Like what are these regional disputes? What is like
because
even yeah, that's kind of what I'm
I
saying. I'm
see
I'm saying it's
Israel
very
as
limited.
I say Israel is a criminal refugee street that's kind of like a proxy of communist Russia, um, where these criminals, like a lot of sex trafficking and stuff, like a Jeff Epstein, will probably go disappear to, right? And then like Ghislaine Maxwell getting 40 years, I don't think she'll ever see a prison cell. Like they might say that she goes there, but I don't think she will. These people are too powerful. They're the kind of people that pull the strings of presidents. When we say that they're puppets, they're the puppeteers. So just because they're on TV saying they're going to jail doesn't mean they're going to.
Right, right. And there are people who doubt if Ghislaine Maxwell is anything other than a made-for-TV fake character. Although I have someone who's trying to call in earlier today, maybe they'll call in, that actually attended, and they saed that they were there in the courtroom. So I'm going to find out, what the reality is. But
Well,
um, it,
I'm sure the trial happens, but do we know that she's going to go into a prison cell? They might take her all the way to jail, but then she might slip out a back door, or they could use a body double and put somebody that's more on our level in her place. I mean, these people are that powerful; it wouldn't be hard, right?
right. Well, now, yeah, I see where you're coming from. I don't know, for example, for sure, rather, if it is, as you say, it's Israel or at the top of this pyramid that controls the world. I don't think it's that simplistic, and I think that a lot of the
It's not that
race-based,
simple, sure.
it can't be, and then a lot of the, uh, I guess, a lot of the memes and a lot of the channels that put out these ideas are being censored, and they're just saying it's just hate speech or whatever. And I think even that is they're being led to kind of get themselves censored. Like the anti-vaxxers, I think they're falling for a trap where they're allowing themselves to be labeled as hate speech just by, I think, even by using whistles. Like you can't even say what you mean outright. You say the J.
Yeah,
You can't even say it.
say
So
key, say key, or like in France, and then you go to jail for that too.
interesting. Well, anyway, I brought up this headline earlier tonight about how the new virus is dangerous misinformation, and that's one of the things they put out there. It's spreading and there's no vaccine against it. So anyway, I can just see here that you've kind of experienced the same thing. So you've created your own platform. You told everybody it's called Goyam TV. Appreciate you calling in and sharing your ideas with us.
Yeah, man. And the Parler, the Israeli shekel, if you look in the symbol, there's, like the dollar sign, if you look up the Israeli shekel symbol, they're almost identical. And then I was looking for that article. The Pirate Bay is like it's a down. I'm sure you're familiar with it. It's like a downloading site for software, and it's just it's cheap. Like LimeWire or BearShare back in the day. It's to pirate music and movies and stuff. And they wrote a little article, basically saying it's embarrassing that Parler was shut down so fast, and it just reminded me of Alex Jones kind of taking a dive, because he set the precedent that you could get banned. Because if anybody had the money to like fight for censorship and to stay online, it would have been Alex Jones, don't you think?
Oh yeah. In fact, I was contacted. I had a conversation with Jim Fetzer, who said that he had in a folder everything that Alex Jones would need to be exonerated to show that they were dealing with an actor. In fact, Fetzer said that the guy he was confronting in court wasn't even the guy from the event, that they used a different actor. So Jones took the fall. He had everything he needed to not take
Wow,
that fall. And I put it up on the
that's
screen. I can
so
see a
sad.
resemblance. And hey, do you agree with my assessment that the parlor shooter, who was a right wing racist guy with a fashion haircut, that they used a parlor shooter psyop to smear Parler just as Parler was being raked over the coals by the MSM?
Yeah, of course, because they want the conservatives to constantly distance themselves from anybody that's pushing white identity. Like they don't want that to be part of that consciousness, because both, like the term fascist, right? You were using earlier, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that that term's misused a lot. They'll say it's just like when corporations merge with the state, but I think what's essential to fascism is it has to be nationalistic, and there's nothing nationalistic about America or even the West right now, right? In general. So when people say, "Oh, that's fascism," I don't think it is, because it doesn't serve the people whatsoever.
Right.
That's
That word, like cult, is probably one of the most misused words of all time. And right now, the fascism that we do see is global. It's the global fascism using
but that's a contradiction.
it kind of is, but
That's like when
it's a
Trump said he was a globalist and a nationalist. Remember that?
well, if you notice here, though,
Yeah,
the only opposition to the encroaching global fascism or eco-fascism, the environmentalist thing, it's America, it's property owners, and it's pretty much America's a pariah on the whole environmentalist thing. And so I think what they've done here is they're trying to associate American values like Second Amendment, First Amendment, and private property with the destruction of the planet itself and the spreading of disease, the pandemic through
oh
misinformation
yeah.
and anti-vax rhetoric. And so, yeah, I think that America is looked at as was pretty much, I think this is the final stand for anything that resembles, freedom and autonomy.
They say that the last plank of communism is property rights, and like you brought up that they're going to push for the global warming and carbon emissions. And I saw that even during the lockdown out here in Denver, Colorado, you could see them over the highways talking about, oh, don't go after five, you should carpool. And I'm like, man, they're coming for that next. And I used to think, as vain as people are, right, the materialistic capitalist mindset, that people will never give up their cars. They just won't. But I didn't think people would just shut over their business down overnight either and just give up their entire livelihood. So I can totally, now I'm expecting it, because they'll probably have buyouts. They'll probably say, we'll give you so much money towards your Tesla, and people will do it. They'll give it
They
up.
will. I was surprised too, and I think this thing is a war on private property. I even think making the vax issue public is taking private medical issues and making it a public thing. So I think it's an erosion, just like social media, where now the norm is to be the star of your own reality TV show with no secrets, to put everything out there. And people went really fast into this COVID thing. And another thing that surprised me is even those who would never moderate their behavior for fear of God or hell, people who don't believe in sin, people who live without any kind of like moral compass or whatever, who are, not that I'm knocking it necessarily, but you could be very promiscuous with no restrictions on your life, with dating apps and whatever. But then COVID comes, and now all these same people became Puritans, socially distanced. And that change happened pretty much overnight. It was like, wow, you got a lot of atheists who don't believe in God to suddenly behave like Puritans.
And I hate it too because now I feel like the germaphobe. I don't know if the spiked protein and what do they call the contamination that the vax have? I forget. There's a word for it. It's like uh
Goo blood, whatever it is,
no, it's like
um,
chafing or like skin
shedding,
coming off. There's a
skin
word.
shedding.
Shedding, exactly, shedding. So now I feel like that guy because I used to have a saying that I live my life like I'm camping, like I eat three all day pizza. Like I used to not want to share my germs when I was like 12, and I got over that. And now I feel like the germaphobe. Now I would not even make out with a woman who was vaccinated, and but I don't know if that's even real. Is it just the graphene? We don't know what's in these things, but a really cool video came out on BitChute, and it was this panel of both scientists and statisticians, and they found some papers, and they basically said that they have evidence now that these pharmaceutical companies have intent, and they can show it with graphs that they were doing controlled experiments looking for death rates. Like that was basically their goal. They were trying to see which would cause the most harm. And they said if they ever brought this into a court, it would actually obliterate their whole, they're not supposed to be liable for anything because they can prove that they had premeditation to harm, which is a totally different ball game.
Right. Interesting. That seems like the theory or the theme behind the movie Utopia, if you haven't seen it. And I don't believe there's anything in it. I think it's a schism. I think it's just it's ideology being injected into society. But I don't believe there's anything in it. But I think it's fascinating that the goo bloods and the pure bloods is this new dynamic they've set up where the ones who are born pure and believe you're born pure see the ones who've taken this as contaminated. Whereas the ones who are taking the contamination see that as purifying them because you're born in need of salvation. So I think this is a religion, and it's about being saved versus unsaved, and the Savior is the state church, the MSM, and its priesthood. And so the people who go against the mainstream news, you're not just conspiracy theorists, but you're rejecting salvation. You're a reprobate.
Even before Corona happened, I was against flus, and I remember the flu shot, and I had just taken a picture and like posted it to my Facebook, and it was an advertisement saying like if you spend $20, we'll give you a vaccine. I'm like, look at this. They're giving them away now. I'm like, it doesn't stop. And then Corona happened, so I always thought it was poison because big pharma was what woke me up to all of this. Before I even got even 9/11, it was like, what are they putting in our food and things like that. But as far as these vaccines go in particular, I didn't know what was in them or anything like that. But I assumed when people were sticking spoons to their arm and stuff that it was a psyop because a lot of times they give us psyops. They
They
do
do.
things where they
Like
want us
and then they can
to
mock those
jump on
things.
it.
Like, oh, these people believe that
Right.
you're magnetic and spoons stick to you, and they get
But
a
it's
lot of people
real.
to believe these
People
things.
are magnetic. It is real. I've
It
seen it in
I I don't
real life.
I don't think it is real.
It's
Well, I mean,
repeatable.
okay, it's repeatable, but I don't think that it's because of that. I think you could have the same experiment done with any group and get the same results. There are other reasons
Uh,
for the spoon
I'm
sticking.
telling you, man, they're magnetic. It's the graphene.
I don't
It's the
believe it.
graphene.
I mean, if it was true, I think there would be people who would do it on purpose. Like I thought about this myself. I would like to have magnetic spots on my body where I could hang things for wearables. Like so when I'm at the gym, my iPhone could just sit right there neatly on my chest because I got a magnetic spot. But no, I don't think it's that simple. And if it was, they would sell it. And again, I'm not a believer. that they're going to exterminate people, and if they are, or if it was going to happen, it's like, well, when? How long are you going to wait? And then two, who are you trying to save by being against it anyway? Because it seems like the only people who would be victimized by it are the fascists who want to control you anyway.
Well, I think actually a lot of people disagree with me because they at first I was thinking depopulation, Georgia Guidestones, but I was like that seems so simple. There's a lot of predictive programming. They also have the Deagle report. Um, but then when I started looking into this nanobot stuff, and when I came to believe that the magnetism, because when I first saw that, I was like, that's such horseshit. Till people at work were showing me in front of me that they could do it, and then I was like, oh, this is real. What the heck's really going on here?
I still
So
think they're
then,
conning. I think they're conning you, and something else too. The people who take the
no, they're
vax,
not even
look, the people who
conspiracy
take it
theorists. They,
are
they
true believers. They wouldn't have enough doubt to even see if they're magnetic. Like, I don't know. I find that very dubious.
oh,
But
I'm
anyway, hey,
telling you,
I
man,
appreciate the call. I got
it's
some
out
voicemails I'm
there.
gonna get to. Call back anytime.
All right, man. Have a good night.
All right, everyone. There's someone who called in from the chat. Appreciate you calling. He has his own platform. I think it was called Goyim TV or something. And yes, you can't be opposed to anything that is designated as hate speech and expect to stay on these platforms. So a lot of people are creating their own platforms, and good for them. That's the nation. That's the nature of the free market. And it's like you want to build your own thing and get your own crowd, go for it. But then what you'll find is that if you succeed, the media will probably target that. And we were talking about the shooting in Christchurch. Well, that shooting in Christchurch was supposedly live streamed on YouTube with a helmet cam. That was used as the basis for some pretty heavy-handed censorship. The reason why you can't stream off your phone on YouTube unless you have 1,000 subscribers is because of Brenton Tarrant and the Christchurch shooting. But moreover, they used that shooting and that video being leaked as an excuse to censor 8chan, 4chan, BitChute. They were shutting these things down in New Zealand. And if you think about it, at that time, they were saying that you would go to jail if you had a copy of the file. And it's because it was very fake. They probably didn't want you to watch it because it looked so fake. The shooting in Christchurch. In fact, that was so ridiculously fake. And anybody who thinks it's real hasn't watched the second video, the second mosque, where you actually see people getting up off the ground after playing dead. So that's how fake it was. You have an individual walking into the street in front of the camera covered in fake blood. Meanwhile, behind him is a guy with a Windex bottle filled up with fake blood. But they used that staged fake event to justify all kinds of censorship and then to also begin this narrative of must hunt down this dangerous information. If you have this information, we will arrest you. And so dangerous misinformation has then become an actual virus, and then it's the virus spread by information. Now it's the dangerous information carriers who are the new super spreaders. All right, Bob Sapp says, I've been reading books of old, the legends and the myths, Spider-Man with his webs and the Batman with his fist. Hey, if you want to call in, please do. The Batman movie or the Batman TV show in the 60s gives you a little hint about the meaning of this archetype, especially now. We look at, there's a few movies out there that use bats in a way of like bringing about some kind of global plague. Daybreakers was one that did that. But actually, it's the 1966 episode of Batman. And the episode was actually the 60, I think it was called the 33rd episode. It's called Fine Finney Friends. And in this episode, you find out that Batman's great grandfather founded the Skull and Bones Society. So it's just kind of a little side note there that Batman's grandfather or great grandfather was at Yale and founded the Skull and Bones. And of course, the Skull and Bones Society, you could consider it to be an order of death, is what they call it, but I think it's all about, Saturn. Saturn, of course, represented here, the Batman. This is the dynamic they give us. They give us the Batman-Joker dynamic. And the Batman and the Joker are pretty much present in a lot of the psyops today, very overtly, ever since the actual Batman movie theater shooting for Dark Knight Rises, where you had James Holmes, who is in the news recently, the Joker shooter. Then you had tie-ins with the Dark Knight Rises movie to various psyops of the time, the Boston bombing, Sandy Hook. And then in Dark Knight Rises, there's a scene where a guy, the Batman like character, the Batman is sitting there with a character without a mask who says, "I don't need a mask. I'm not afraid." And Batman says, "You wear a mask to protect those you love, not for yourself." I'm like, wow, that was right out of 2020, but 7 years in advance. And then Batman throws a COVID shaped grenade, like a smoke grenade, and it creates this mushroom cloud. Just another example of the Batman movies, just like all these other movie franchises. Hunger Games is big right now in predictive programming. They use these movies to put the ideas out there, to plant the seeds, and to condition the minds for the news of the future. John Dee, the Elizabethan astrologer, magician, advisor to the Queen. He's an advisor to Mercator, from the Mercator projection. Anyway, he was said to use a black mirror to scry. In other words, to read the future like a crystal ball, to speak to angels, etc. And in many ways, your TV screen is like that scrying mirror, especially if you watch Netflix. And it's not a coincidence. It's not that Netflix's CEO, one of its co-founders, is the great nephew of Edward Bernays, the father and progenitor of public relations, which is just a nice way of saying mass mind control. So you have the mass mind control, really the creator of it, but the guy who mastered this whole art of propaganda and how to use it to influence the public mind. And one of his descendants starts up Netflix. If you look at the screen here, back in 2019, I stated on Infinite Plane Radio that we're going to start seeing spacesuits normalized in the following years. Well, here we have something. Chinese children returning to school in Dalian, China, and they're all in little inflatable biohazard suits that look like spacesuits. You can see them, if you're looking at the screen, waddling into school, each with their own little. It looks like they each have a little air compressor, but yeah, look like little space, like little astronauts, like children in the Jetsons. And this is because we're in the space age. The space age is the age of being socially distanced from one another in your basements, in your subterranean, because it's all subterranean, because in the space age you can't go on the surface yet. Like when you go on Mars, you go on the moon, you won't be on the surface, you'll be underground. It's also about the cyberspace age, because all of your interactions will be through the metaverse, everything will be augmented. And of course, the spacesuit is to protect you from the environment. But what they've actually done here, I think, is they've created a pretext where they're going to put you in a spacesuit to protect the environment from you. Like you wear a mask, not for yourself, because you're healthy. No, you wear it to protect those you love who might not be. It'll be the same thing with the spacesuit. Something to, I guess, filter your air, reduce your carbon footprint. I'm going through some comments. Again, if you want to call in, 833-311-1984. Alex Jones's wife has 5-pound balls. We'll talk about that in a second. Looks like Jeranism has joined us on the YouTube chat. Good to see you there. Flatfact says the guidestones don't say depopulate, it says maintain. It's not big to read. Seabass asks if I watched Utopia. Oh, no, Brave New World. Yeah, I watched Utopia, loved it. I mean, it tells you everything. It has predictive programming, it has crisis actors, it has false flag psyops to sell vaccines that have a hidden depopulation agenda. Has it all. It even has the Men in Black style contact tracing of the people who might have seen the dangerous misinformation. I'll check out Brave New World. I think I've seen the preview for it. Okay, that's a fake Jeranism account if somebody wants to ban it. He would never say that. Okay, Alex Jones's wife struck him over 20 times and try to hit him with a 5 pound stone ball. My question is, why does she have stone balls just lying around? Also, want to give a shout out to all of the Infinite Plane radio listeners in South Africa. On New Year's, we had reached the chart peak position of 111 on Apple Podcasts in South Africa. So I'll put a link in the chat if you want to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, if you want to leave a review. All right, let me go through some of these other things that we have earmarked. I keep everything on my minds.com account. Again, this is the year of Soylent Green, something to look forward to. Ghislaine Maxwell got a booster. There's a Russian rocket about to land somewhere tomorrow. So that's another thing. All the predictive programming has us ready for this. It's in the movies. Your Space Force is drilling right now for something to fall from the sky. On the screen is a picture of Hitler and Walt Disney. Many believe it's one and the same. Infinite Plane Radio. Hey, what's up, caller? Do you think that Adolf Hitler and Walt Disney might be played by the same person?
I mean, if by the way, this is Neo Mode. Hello.
Oh,
But,
hey, what's up, Neo
I
Mode?
mean, possibly. I've actually been, I don't know. Adolf Hitler's a very mysterious figure because the Nazi occult not references, but their interest in the occult and all the things. So I don't know, but they could have been some type of collaboration between the two.
Now, the
But
Nazi and the occult. Now, that's interesting. I'm glad you brought that up. I only bring up the Nazi Disney thing because of Hitler hanging out with Werner von Braun and Hitler's role with creating the space, outer space, and
the
helping us
fantasy
visualize. Yeah,
of
the
space.
fantasy. Exactly, exactly.
Yeah, pardon me for coughing, but yeah, absolutely. It's clear if you look at it from that lens. That's one thing that's also very interesting are the ties, between these things and just the power of imagery and animation and, just captivating that part of our brains with wonder, magic and all these things. It's almost like priming us to, believe in making us prone to believe in some fantasy in the future, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. Like you could say that Mars and the moon bases, it's like Disneyland for the adults. It's like a utopia, and just like with Disneyland, you get there and you're at a place that you've had in your imagination your whole life. So by the time you get to your Mars base or your moon base, well, you've been prepared for it your whole life in imagination land.
Yeah. Now with things like the metaverse, like it's just further isolating us into that to where that could be a possibility, because let's say they do establish some type of moon base or a Mars base, or try to pull that off somehow. They have to prime these people to live in a place like that, to be isolated and,
Yeah,
so
that's kind of interesting. Another interesting point there is that all of the
that's where I see the
preparation
world
station,
going.
it's all about isolation. If you're going to go to Mars or the moon base, they're going to have you prepare in like a prison cell for 9 months for all intents and purposes.
Yeah. All this ties together, but the COVID thing, what you're talking about matches 100% with that. Because it's like
Oh, yeah.
but that's in mass though. In mass they're stay home, and then they even say isolation. So they're using these terms, and it just baffles me. It's just crazy to me that like people are just going along with it and accepting it when it's so opposite of our nature. We're
I
supposed
think
to.
you're onto something here because yes, they did put us all into isolation, and I think this is lockdown culture. They're getting us ready to just embrace this as like the metaverse is where we're going to interact, and to save the planet and each other, we get locked down. But basement dwelling video
Yeah,
game
because that
players,
goes in with the carbon, like everything is intertwined, and in my opinion, at least, with Agenda 2030. So, like, pretty much, if you follow that, you can see generally the bullet points of where they're going to, initiate these kind of priming operations. You know, so they want
yes,
to revamp the health industry. First it started with the electronic medical records because that was a whole different ball game. That was through Obama. So electronic medical records kind of started it off, and the exchange of information between offices, which makes sense. This is the medical industry getting on board with the internet now. So now with that like opened the floodgates, kind of, I think, in my opinion, for everything now, because like all that shit, or excuse me, but all that stuff is on. Like there are applications now that doctors use to interact with their patients now. So it's like
Yes.
it's very deep, and all that is kickstarted by COVID.
Yeah, they fast tracked so much with that, and I think with the culture they use the video game basement dwelling, sitting in front of the TV, sitting down in front of the TV is conditioning you not to wander and explore, but to go through just in your mind, wander, live vicariously. And I think even the
Yeah,
things they give
that
us,
will suffice.
like their iPhone,
Like,
your cell phone, these are things that I think even the way to describe it, cell phone, iPhone, iPod. I think even the tools that they give us the names of these things kind of symbolize or signify that yeah, this is you going into your own pod.
yeah, that's crazy to think about. Actually, yeah, that makes sense. iPod, it's your pod, it's everything. A pod it encompasses you, encloses you. You know, and in a way, that's kind of where we're going. On a like philosophic level, like we're just enclosing ourselves. They're like, I don't know. I was watching something yesterday. It said something about a permanent state of anxiety, and something about mass formation. Like there's a term for it already, but I was like, damn, that makes like they use it to describe the Nazis. Going back to Adolf Hitler stuff, they're talking about that stuff. And I was like, wow, that's so crazy, because that's exactly what's happening. It's like we're all. It's crazy to think that we're all like begging for our own enslavement, essentially. Like, show me your papers. Like the unvaccinated, the vaccinated. They've created these dichotomies, and and amplified something that really doesn't exist. And I'm not saying COVID doesn't exist, but this whole system they're trying to bring in through this is so clear and obvious, like in every step. That's the thing that scares me, is like all it took was a switch to flip, and it's already been 2 years.
Yes, it's been 2 years into our 2 weeks of this lockdown as a new normal, and what I'm seeing here is that yeah, if the people take sides, if you take a side pro or anti, you're pretty much in this matrix, and you're the ones who are gonna bring about our mutual destruction. And those of us who watch from the sidelines or aren't taking sides are more or less dragged into it because we're outnumbered by the people who go with the program.
Oh, absolutely. It's like, and that's what's crazy to reveal. Like people you think that would be a certain way aren't, but even beyond that, like it's just pushing us to a whole different level, of herd mentality almost. Like, why are we segregating people? We're identifying people, these unvaccinated, these unclean people, just like they use that rhetoric, against Jewish people in Nazi Germany. So it's like all those things correlate, and it's like how hypocritical of people to
Yes,
to
yes.
to virtue signal and to claim to be, you know, of this higher ilk, because you choose to go with the flow. What happens are like rebel. And one thing, like when Rage Against the Machine and all these bands, it just made me so sad. I'm like, dude, like, and not that I'm like a fan of them or anything, but like bands that once stood for opposing the system now are like giving being spokespeople for the system. And
Yes,
not only
it
the
makes me think
system,
that they
but
were
but
probably
a private medical company, like
they
the
got to be
pharmaceutical
controlled
industry.
from the beginning though. Like let's say you know that
That's what it
run
revealed,
this
though. Yeah.
you're going to run an agenda in a few years. You want to make sure that the rebels who get the attention of the rebellious minded are there to lead them astray. And I think that's what they do. So you have like people who are
Yeah, well, if you study, not to interrupt you, but if you study tactics, like you're saying, of Edward Bernays, of these people, you understand where the roots come, the counterculture in the 60s. I'm not sure if you're familiar with like Days of Noah or his channel or his work at all, but he has some very good, long form videos about how a lot of the counterculture was manufactured. So if like what you're saying is happening now, like, what I'm saying, like like we're scholars of it now, like everyone who follows this channel, like
right. Yeah,
that,
precisely. I'll
how it
check
all
out
ties together.
Days of Noah. I'll take a look because that's a very fascinating topic when you go into the manufacture of the counterculture, and it was controlled opposition culture. And you have intelligence agencies who are making sure that they have bottom up control by deep, deep infiltration. And that's where we find a lot of the death fakers and a lot of the people who participate in psyops. They're part of that.
Oh, absolutely. Like for sure. Like there's, I mean, they have the technology, and that's another thing too. Is like a lot of the shit that we talk about on channels like this and this knowledge, this kind of, I don't know, but all of it, all the stuff is documented. Like that, it's like how are you not? Like they call people conspiracy theorists because they have more knowledge or they have different knowledge than them instead of humbling themselves. And I think it's a lot of ego. Like that's what they're preying on people right now is ego, and it's all about feelings and emotions, and those are weak, low based,
And
like in my opinion,
okay, you brought
frequencies,
up
vibrations. Like
virtue signaling. So you have the comedian Pat Oswalt, who posted on Instagram today. He's starting off the new year with having lost a friend. He's no longer friends with Dave Chappelle. And the reason he's not friends with Dave Chappelle is because Dave Chappelle has made jokes that are offensive and go against Pat's political opinions. So you have these comedians who are usually the ones who are speaking truth to power or saying the uncomfortable truths, calling it like it is, and they're all just a bunch of virtue signaling gatekeepers for the MSM. There aren't any rebels in comedy that I can find, and the reason you can't find them is that they are generally censored if they do go against what mainstream allows comedians to joke about.
oh yeah, and that's what's sad. It's like comedy used to be like they, it's so different. Like just that's a prime example of it. Like, and that's only like a 20-year at max difference. But you're talking about Dave Chappelle. There are people way more nasty than Dave Chappelle that got famous and were sensations because of that. Like just interactions with hecklers and stuff. If you go back to different comedians, there's a lot of derogatory stuff, but that's a comic. A comic is designed, not designed, but it's something that it pokes fun at everything. Nothing is safe. Nothing is sacred in comedy. So it's like that. That's a freedom of speech. That's something that like people should fight for to keep alive because there's always been comics, but if you go back in time, there are people who get persecuted. That's the beauty of at least what we have in America. But like that's not going to align in this future world, because it's all mind games. They're all playing mind games like that. Like the only reason he probably does that is because he feels the need to speak about Dave Chappelle to save his career because that's the mainstream now. The mainstream now is that's all it
Because
is
the
COVID, and
cancel
it's so saturated.
and cancel culture is part of this idea. Like you can not eat some foods you don't like. You can not shop at places that you don't you don't want to support that business for whatever reason. You make your own choice. You don't have to burn it down. You don't have to patronize places that you don't like for any reason. And the idea here with cancel culture is that if one person finds something offensive, then it ought to go away for everybody. And they've treated videos like that on YouTube for some time and on social media where, oh, this meme or this comment or this video is so offensive to me that it's probably offensive to a large number of people, so let's just pull it. And they've just conditioned people to accept that. So, yeah, cancel culture is part of this censorship and this new notion that ideas are dangerous and we need to be protected from ideas. And so now we're in the era of the thought criminals, and that's pretty much where we are right now.
Minority Report, like we're literally in that. Like all these things come to fruition. So it's like maybe there's some collective, people always have foresight. That's the beauty of humans. You know what I'm saying? We have foresight and ability to have ideas like that. But maybe their imagination is based off of, something factual. Like talk about 1984, like or like a movie like Minority Report. That's a real thing in that. So why would you know what I mean? It's almost like that's why I believe in predictive programming and all these things. Is like someone out there has the knowledge that there is technology like that, or maybe the world is going like that. So I'm a billionaire or multimillionaire. It makes so much sense that I'm going to pay my producer friend in Hollywood to put these concepts in here. You don't have to, that's where all this comes from. It's like maybe it's not made up. I mean, you look at Aldous Huxley, any of these people, they're all connected to big finance people or like, cutting edge circles. They're not in small circles.
No,
They're all deeply connected.
You can look at certain think tanks and you can draw out you can map out the trajectory of these various ideas. And we do live, I believe, I think it's pretty apparent now, the conspiracy theorists have been right. There is a conspiracy. and there has been, and it's time control. The mass media, whoever controls it, they control our concept of time by controlling our news every day. And that's why I talk about the news and the fake news, because you can ignore it, you can choose to just tune out. But then when you do return to it, you won't know what's real and what's not. We're being given an alternate history that is by de facto the real one. It's the one that's going to go down in the history books, like the official story of 9/11. Even if you find the footage and you watch the footage where there are no planes, it doesn't matter. The history books will say planes hit the towers, and if you don't say that and answer that in your tests at school, you don't get the passing grade. So you're really, people are really pretty much forced to go into this fictional universe just to function.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's the craziest part. It's because it's all once an event happens, you know what I'm saying? After years go by, it's all about the history and who kept a record. So, of course, A&E, History Channel, all the major textbooks, McPherson, all these, McGraw-Hill, all these people are the top dogs. So they have the control of the narrative. A corporate company has control of the narrative of an event in its general form. So if like you don't dig deeper and find different things, but now with the internet, a lot of that work is on the internet now and not in written form. So it's like, you know, easier to shut it off, or at least like, places like Twitter have the view count, or YouTube has the traffic. That's where you want to be. So it doesn't even matter if you're telling the truth. If you're shunned off these platforms like they're doing now, all the information is useless. You know, they
Yeah,
control the narrative.
absolutely.
They
They
control
really
every
have.
aspect
It,
of everything.
you brought up Minority Report, but in that movie Utopia I was mentioning, one of the subplots here is that the characters who figured out that there was a plot and that it was in the comics, uh, that right there, it's an example of what I would call predictive programming. But this thing is that they were thought criminals. They were basically being eliminated one by one. And we haven't seen that in the sense of if you have misinformation, they're arresting you or killing you or eliminating you. But they do shadow ban you, they delete you, they label you, or they smear you rather. And smearing's a big part of it now. To where now if you're a QAnon friendly person, you look into QAnon. Well, now you're associated with these people in Dallas waiting for JFK to come back while drinking bleach.
Yeah, that's the
That's
funniest thing. Is like, bro, like all these people are like, they just, where do these people come from? Like Charlie Ward and all the, what I'm saying, Simon Parks, all these weirdos, dude. Like those dudes are seriously, but they just like it's them and then X-22 report. Like all they've done for the past like 2 years is just wag the tail, or follow the leader, and it's like so apparent. It's like, dude, like this shit is not. You really think that they have a plot, but in my opinion, all that is manufactured. All these people are put in place. It's all about money. It's like
yes,
they
the
just want to feed
real
off
time
the
media
view count.
control. In order to exert that kind of control, they have agents in real time, propaganda agents, who are sowing these various storylines and narratives. And the ones you mentioned are the ones who bring up the stuff like in 2020, they said that there was this king named Joseph Hallett who was going to be the king of the world. And a lot of the QAnoners believed it. And they thought Trump was behind it. Well, then he disappears.
Yeah,
And then in Canada, there's some queen who they just arrested for making threats. And then you have this idea that JFK Jr. is going to come back and he's king. So they have a lot of
yeah. They have their
misinformation.
messiahs.
Messiahs, exactly. And there's a few of them running around right now.
Oh yeah, and it's crazy to think about because like they're the involved in the smear campaign, similar to how Alex Jones and how sensational he is. Like I knew as soon as I'm not sure if you've seen the Piers Morgan interview with him. It's iconic video. But dude, I was like, man, something's wrong with this guy. Like you have the opportunity on because I think that was like his biggest appearance at recent years at that time, and he just blew it. I'm like, how do you sit in front of the or quote unquote truth community, and represent those ideals and put it in that platform and behave that way? You have to contain yourself
When he
because that's the
screamed,
reason why. Yeah, screaming
1776 will
at them.
happen again if you try to take the guns. Yeah, he lost his cool and he looked like somebody you
Yeah,
wouldn't trust with a gun because he's about to pop off. And
because that's
Alex
the point
Jones,
of his existence.
he's got to be an agitator because on 1/6 he got on stage in front of everybody, and he says, if Joe Biden gets in office, he's going to be taken out one way or another. So Jones is an obvious provocateur, and his backtracking on Sandy Hook is unforgivable, and you can't overlook that.
Oh yeah, and that's another thing too that's wild is that they followed through that lawsuit and all that stuff. So that set a legal precedent. So once again, Sandy Hook sets the legal precedent with all the school shootings. That's the reason that you don't get any footage out of a school shooting anymore. Like Columbine, they released it. There was no law at the time. Now federally, I believe there's a law that states that like if the family doesn't want it released, it doesn't get released. It's not public record anymore. So like
Oh, interesting,
if there is
interesting.
any evidence,
They've improved because yeah, this is something people used to say all the time. The reason they're goofing up on these psyops is there's some white hats on the inside. They want you to know. And I'm saying no, they've always been really sloppy and bad. If you go back in time and you look at previous psychological operations, crisis actors have always been notoriously bad. And so the less they show us, the less there is to pick apart. That's why with Sandy Hook, there weren't any autopsy reports to look at because they took care of that in advance. And I think you're right about this, that they're they're aware of how many people are aware, and so they have to take that into account.
oh, absolutely. Oh, I do want to say one thing though that I forgot to say. There's an article by MIT that I think was released March 20th of 2020. And it's called "We're Never Going Back to Normal." And I don't know if you can put that on the screen, but that's like they show a graph and it goes to something that you were speaking about, talking about how the lockdown culture. Well, in that article, it talks about how like basically like when COVID numbers rise to a certain point, they want to lock down, and then it's like modulating society. Like, oh, we do this when we're up, and then there's when it's down, this is enacted, and it's just like showing this graph. I'm like, dude, like this just happened. Like, what is going on? And it's like, so I always just refer back to that. The further we go into this craziness,
Wow, we're never going
but
back to normal, whatever that was. And you know what I think? I think you're right on this. And this summer we
like it's
had that
already planned out.
we had this summer where this summer Gabby Petito was kidnapped by Brian Landry, and the timing of it and everything just seemed to me that this was actually a retelling of the story of Persephone, or Virgo personified, being kidnapped by Hades and taken into the underworld. But the name stood out to me, Brian Landry,
Oh,
driving the
interesting.
van, brain washing or brain laundry. So I looked at this
Oh yeah,
as
brain laundry.
that collectively, we are all Stockholm Syndrome kidnapped victims in the back of a van, and the brainwashing is taking us all to Hades. So there is no going back.
Yeah, there could be some coding to that, and I mean, like I'm sure they could have picked some other crazy story. You know how many things happen in this country, just this country alone, just to speak about. You could probably find a similar story like Gabby Petito's that happened that same day somewhere else in this country. But why was hers chosen? Probably because it fit some certain narrative criteria, like some to encode the reality. Because these people know how to work subconsciously. Like, and anyone who doesn't see that, it, I don't know, I don't know what to say because it's so obvious. Like it's so cringy almost. Like all this COVID, it's like promotion. It's like everything's COVID. Like,
It's
and it's like,
hypochondria at
wow,
this point. It's hypochondria, and it's an obsession, kind of like it's like
yeah,
an over
exactly.
obsession with sin. Fundamentalists. It's a fundamentalist cult, and they see it everywhere. And it's bias confirmation at this point, where if everything you have, if your only tool is a hammer, everything begins to look like a nail. And it seems like today, yes, everything quite literally fits within this worldview they have. And I mentioned an article earlier that said that the people who are overly focused on this pandemic propaganda have a diminished cognitive capabilities, that their thinking processes are slowing down, and I think that might be a byproduct of the chronic fear.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, you're if you can sustain a certain frequency, which would be whatever fear is biologically, however we resonate or whatever when we're in that state. What if a lot of people are in that state at once, consistently for a year or 2 years? What does that do to society? You know what I mean? Like, so that's very interesting. You brought that up because I think that it does have some impact.
That, and I read an article. It was a article that referenced a book called On Killing by Lieutenant Colonel Grossman, retired from the Marines, and he wrote a book about what it takes for one human being to overcome the natural resistance to kill another. And the book was about basic training and how soldiers are prepared for that kind of thing. And one of the points he made was that the face coverings are used to dehumanize and to take away the sense
Oh
of
yeah,
individual guilt and responsibility for your own actions. And that the longer a society is covering its faces, the less empathy you're going to have with its citizens.
yeah. It's like a cattle, how they kill cattle, right? Like they don't see them, or like they. I think it's some. I think it's with cattle. Like someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but like the way they line them up so they don't see something like that. So they don't see the other one die or something like that, or else they all get scared. I don't know if it's cattle, but or it could be with another animal. But that's how they slaughter them, something like that. I was like, oh, that's interesting. All you got to do is just not, So that makes sense though, because there's no personality to it. You can't see them scream, you can't see them in pain. There's no expression. That's how we read people. So they're taking away our ability to. And if you think about it, that's interesting too, because that's degrading our ability as a society to, and just as humans, to be able to read. The expression of someone. That goes back to the beginning of time, being able to see a face. You know,
Yes, that's a major thing that a major component of interpersonal communication is facial expressions and tones, and even the clarity of our words goes down. That's all intentional, and then the faces you do see are the ones
but
on the
yeah, how do
screen.
people read lips? People who are deaf, that's how they read lips. So it does matter. Like there has to be an ability there.
But don't worry, the people on the screen won't be covering their faces. So you do get that human interaction. But again, it's only through the screen. And I think this is all intentional. I think it's part of the space age. And I think we could even call the space age the cyberspace age. Because that's what's going to separate us. That's what's going to create the space. It's the metaverse. It's not Mars or the moon.
Oh, yeah, but it'll get there if they want it to be. But maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe they'll just keep sustaining that that fantasy of space, and only select people have ever been to space. So it's like everyone else is gonna be left down here. So we might as well just live in this fake reality because our reality now sucks apparently. So it's like, and just people are obsessed with video games and technology, and I don't blame them because we're human beings. We can get it. This is good technology. These things are good that we have. Having a device, I'm talking on YouTube. I'm up from my phone right now to some other people who have similar ideals, and just the fact, I don't know where everyone's at. All these things are because of the internet. So it's a double-edged sword, because it's a gift at the same time. But like, too much of anything is bad. So like the fact that we're all like completely consumed by our phones, and, I'm guilty of it too. But like that's where all the information is coming from. So it's like, but it shows how easy it is to control society. Though we all have literal personal nodes on us. Every person, dude, on this planet pretty much has their own personal node in their pocket.
Yeah, it's
Like
it's kind of
you could
staggering to
mine
think about.
cryptocurrency in your pocket off your phone if you want from some type of crypto. You're a running node. So all this data, have you ever looked at the metadata on your iPhone, like the raw, like
Rarely I have before, but yeah, and I don't take any of this stuff for
it's very
granted.
interesting
I
because
don't
it
have
tells the positioning, directions, exact, very specific things, and the algorithm guesses like if you're walking or that's where all these. It's crazy.
look what they've done though is they've accomplished the total surveillance society without having to put cameras everywhere because they managed to sell people on auto surveillance. And yeah, it's quite remarkable what they've done. And this thing about uh, technology and this communication and how it's accelerating and how it seems like we're being brought into this metaverse. I think it's to bring us into simulation, and I think it's a new religion. And I'm not anti-technology, but I think like I'm not
Well, yeah.
anti-religion.
What is the alleged New World Order's main goal?
One world religion,
It's
and
one.
that's what
Absolutely.
they're
So
getting with this.
yeah, you get that because when you strip people of religion, and like now it's like we're living in like the probably the least godliest times, as far as belief of people. Like, Some people don't. Some people do. Some people believe in lucky crystals and vibration, all these different things. Like what is religion? Some people believe in all religions. You know, but it's like once that's diluted, but you're seeing all the leaders like the Pope become like more worldly, accept these things. So where do you think it's going? You know what I'm saying? Like it's going to one. They're going to absolve themselves of responsibility and just be figureheads in this system that's full of tolerance and equality, and it's
Okay, that's the
that's what it
theme.
is.
That's the theme of a couple of movies I mean, I've been watching the most recent popular movies released on Netflix for this reason. And the one I mentioned called The 100 is about this post apocalyptic society where the control over world governments was given to an AI bot who decided there were too many people and eliminated a lot of them. And I just watched another one on it based on Philip K. Dick's books. And the one I watched, I think it's called Electric Dreams. And in it, you have this company called AutoFac or Auto Factory, just like Amazon, where it's in a future where the AI that controls the factory has ruled out the need to have any people working there. So it's an autonomous factory serving man, but then at some point it realizes that man is destructive and needs to be farmed so they don't overpopulate. And so basically the AI becomes man's boss. And that's a reoccurring theme in all the movies I've seen lately. And I think that is where we're headed. I think that is why you have people
Oh
like
yeah.
Elon Musk floating these ideas out there.
Well, I mean, all these things. I mean, it's so crazy deep, but the plot is there. You see the trajectory of all these ideas are going. All right, so it's a natural evolution. There's transhumanism is an idea. It's a goal for some people to get to this level, and some people speak about it like it's there's no question of it, and it makes sense because like if you look at biology, we're electrochemical. Our whole body is electrochemical. That's why we have water in our body. So it's like that's so all they have to do is develop something like a it's just like an audio interface for your computer. You plug in and you have different plugins. We have different organs, we have a brain. All these things operate electrochemically, spinal cord, all these things. We're a biological computer. So all they're doing is just hacking into that. And I they're there. So it's like we'll get a headset, but it's like at that point it becomes there's so many ethical implications though. It's like who gets it first? What all this stuff is, what about the Android phones that blew up and they said you couldn't carry those, had a weird battery. Remember that?
Yeah, and
Like what
this reminds me of
what if your head blows up?
I think last time I brought this up when we spoke about how in the movie They Live, you have to put on the glasses to see reality, and here you have to see who really controls it and how it really works. Well, it seems like today you have to pull off the glasses to see, and everybody is born with the glasses on. So They Live has kind of come true in the reverse. And I feel like those of us who are critically examining the media like we are the only ones who are taking our glasses off at any point in the day or pulling the lens
Yeah.
off
Oh,
rather,
for sure.
taking off that filter.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, because everything's been saturated now. Like me, the minute all this happened, the minute I got laid off work, I'm like, all right, this is weird. Nothing like this ever, like nothing like this has ever happened before. This is kind of weird, you know what I'm saying? But then the propaganda started immediately, commercials immediately, YouTube ads immediately. I'm like, okay, I see where this is going. So it's like, but everyone's so saturated in it now. But I never cared though. I saw where it was going. So I got COVID one time. I don't care. I have not been vaccinated. I'm not even going to test. I don't care. I just keep living, and my life has not changed, other than what I can't change. But me not living in that paradigm, not existing mentally in that paradigm, just being aware of it, like
You
I
were
didn't see it.
you didn't get the
I
fear.
couldn't see.
You weren't
When did you
terrorized,
see
is what you're
anyone?
saying. Because
No.
that's really what it's
When did you
about,
see
fear
anyone
control.
drop dead at Walmart? I didn't see a person drop dead at Walmart. Everything's normal. I can go to Walmart. I can go to the stores. Everything's open. What's the difference? I don't, you know what I'm saying? But people, so I never could understand that because I know it's bullshit. So it's like, but that's scary to me though that people like, you know what I'm saying, fall for that shit and just like live in
That's
that state
that's the big
all
test
day.
though. The big test coming up is the mass media mind control psychological operation entertainment complex. Is it going to be able to pull off space wars? Russia, China versus
Yeah.
America? Are they going to be able to do it? Because if so, it's going to be all through the TV screen and cyberspace. I don't. I think it's going to be very light on the actual like evidence in front of our faces. Not that I expect that we'll need any, because you'll have lying crisis actors. But to me,
No,
that's the
because I
test.
mean, look at what they've been able to do with all this stuff. I'm talking about. You mentioned crisis actors. We're going back 2011, 2012. A lot happened 2013, 14, 15, maybe. That's it. After that, it kind of laid off. Trump got in office. This shit kind of the crisis actor shit. I mean, I saw a lot of it, but it was not nearly like what it was before. But you see how they use every piece of information on the media to create a narrative, create a story. Like they've been doing this, they're masters of it, and definitely got more proficient now. Because now it's like you're seeing it happen. You know what I'm saying? Like you're seeing something. I'm seeing something, constructed narrative, blasted everywhere on TV, on my phone, everywhere. I can't get around it. There's little notifications that pop up on posts that I'm looking at. CDC this, blah blah. You can't escape it. So it's like, you know what I'm saying? It's all through that. So you know what I'm saying? Like I said, when did you ever see anyone drop dead in front of you from COVID? You know what I'm saying?
You're
Or
exactly right.
I just
Look,
asphyxiate and get taken to a hospital. Like,
they've created a fictional universe, and the people live in it. It's like cosplay or LARPing, where we live in a society of
yeah,
LARPers. Unfortunately, a bunch of LARPers and crisis actors who take
yeah.
everything too
I've heard you make
seriously.
that reference. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, but I'm gonna continue watching. But yeah, I appreciate you letting me talk and stuff.
Awesome. Well, hey, Neo Mode Gucci Flip, yeah, appreciate you
Hey,
calling in, and go ahead.
I got a Neo mode bar real quick. I just want to let you know because it's hilarious. Um, Mr. Miyagi had to go get my wax on. Krispy Kreme, I had to go get my Vax on.
Ooh, that's pretty
That's
good.
gonna be
Okay, okay.
a new Neo mode song. So yeah,
Hell yeah, hell yeah. Okay,
thought I'd let you
good.
guys know. It's called Fauci is my God.
Fauci's my God. All right, I look forward to hearing that, and thanks for sharing the bar. All right, everyone, this is Neo
Yes,
Mode Gucci
absolutely.
Flip. Hey, man, thanks for calling.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, long time caller there. A lot of interesting talks we've had since the first time we spoken, and he's provided a few tracks. And there you got to hear a preview of some bars for Fauci is God. Look forward to that. Bull Run says, look up Inside Job on Netflix. Looks like a new Futurama style show based on conspiracy theories. Yeah, you know what's interesting about that one is episode 3 has flat earthers hijacking Jeff Bezos's mega yacht, putting a gun to his head and demanding to be taken to the edge of the world. And I'm like, wait, now he's on a yacht on the news, and they have this flat earther. Just interesting what they've done here. They've associated flat earthers with terrorists. It used to be terrorists would hijack a boat, hijack a plane. No, now it's the flat earthers and the hollow earthers and the Bigfoot believers. It's the conspiracy theorists are the new terrorists. Spiritual Vapor says Cyber Polygon is going to start the war. The people never fight back. Yeah, they don't fight back. You're right about that. And yes, Cyber Polygon. Glad you brought that up. And right now, you can just do a search. I think just search Space Force, Space War. Look up those terms. U.S. Space Force holding war games to simulate the cutting edge of U.S. capabilities in space. So yes, war games in space happening right now. All of the movies reiterates the same idea. There's going to be war in space. Stuff is going to fall. It's so pervasive, as the caller was just saying. This is an inescapable echo chamber of lies. And this is a test coming up. I think it's a litmus test, and I don't expect humanity to pass this one. Humanity collectively, there might be some people here and there pockets of sanity, but they believed it when the Tesla Roadster was set into space. They believed the moon landing. They believed in the entire 2020 narrative for the most part, or they believed in some variant of the main lie. You have the main lie, and then you have the alternative lie. So you have pro-vax and anti-vax. The anti-vax thing is alternative lies. The truth is not even in the middle necessarily. The truth is off the stage. It's not even in the same realm. So you have some people who don't take sides, or they're kind of balanced. I'm in the middle. I'm sorry, if you're in the middle, you're you're just as bad as being on either of the fringes. New York Post publishes this nice bit of news how a Category 5 hurricane could wipe out New York City for good. 99% of the news today is just doomsaying. It's all just doomsday preaching. If you don't modify your behaviors, Globe's going to punish you. Globe's going to flood you. The COVID devil's going to get you if you don't watch your mouth. If you don't listen to your priesthood, go to your TV church. If you listen to the heretic conspiracy theorists, yep, you're going to die. You'll go to COVID hell. COVID will take you. Okay, let's see. Happy birthday again to Bitcoin, Kyle Rittenhouse, and Greta Thunberg. Just want to bring that up again. Talked about Patton Oswalt, Major League Pizzagator, who denounced his previous endorsement of Dave Chappelle because Dave Chappelle told some jokes that this guy didn't like. We talked about Bezos, who used to look like Dr. Evil, but now he looks like the heart eyes emoji on the Titanic on a $42,000 per week super yacht. Again, that number 42. Betty White, dead at 99 on New Year's. That's all a ritual. She's not really dead. She might be, but my point is, the name, it's all encoded. The dog star Sirius is worshipped unwittingly by most on New Year's. The dog star known to the Masons as the blazing star, which is a white star. It's also known as the Star of Bethlehem. So when you have Betty White, it's Bethlehem White, trailblazing star, dead at 99. Too many references to be a coincidence. They're constantly using their celebrities as not only propaganda outlets, but to communicate their real agendas and their rituals, the various ritual props. A couple other things really quick. This is a screen cap from Utopia, Season 1, Episode 5. You have this Greta-like child who just got vaxxed, but in the movie she's a crisis actress who pretends to be sick. Then they give her the vax. And she goes out to a crowd and she says, "Give your child this vaccine before it's too late." Then you have another scene from the movie, some articles from the local news. Bats in Peru, T-shaped rashes. So bats in Utopia are the cause of the infection, the pandemic, the flu, or the epidemic. And then you have a communion wafer given to someone by the Bill Gates-like character. Again, I've made this correlation between communion wafers and the vaccine. And funnily enough, the communion wafer in Utopia has a QR code on it. So it kind of reiterates this mark of the beast vaccine connection to the communion wafer, which again, I think it's a communion wafer, nothing more. I don't think it has any nutritional value. I don't think it has any medicinal value. I think these things are just props. All right, Dave Sims says there's a link to my Rage parody. Okay, I'll go ahead and bring that up. Rage Against the Machine went from F you, I won't do what you tell me to F you, you will do what the MSM News tells you, or I will snitch on you and rage on you.
It's me, your former vice president of the United States, Mr. Al Gore, in the house.
All right, excellent. I'm going to go ahead and play this song here momentarily. Let me really quick just put a couple links in the chat. Again, this is a parody, Shilling in the Name of, by Dave Sims. Appreciate the link. And this is a parody of Raging for the Machine. And isn't that what it is? I was listening to Pink Floyd. I heard a track a couple days ago, Welcome to the Machine. And I'm like, what happened to the counterculture? Calling out the machine, the Matrix. And now it's like, oh, you can't go watch the new Matrix movie unless you're double vaxxed, triple boosted, double masked, and you believe in climate change. All right, everyone, thanks for calling. Appreciate the calls and the comments. And again, this is Dave Sims, Shilling in the Name of. Have a great night.
Listen, Mr. Gore, you better get your ass up here We got very important things going on. We need more people jab now than ever. And we got bands like Rage Against the Machine doing their part by doing everything that the machine wants, by getting people injected. But we can up it up like 10 notches if you come in and I said, I'm the man for the job. Here we go. Chilling in the name of... Some of those that force taxes are the same that wear masks. Some of those that force taxes are the same that wear masks. Some of those that force taxes